In the horrific year of 3100 AD, the Zerg invasion shattered human civilization, and the remaining bases struggled to survive in various parts of the world. Annie has lost hope in life since her husband James and daughter Lily passed away. She numbs herself with alcohol in the second-hand shop every day. That day, Annie was walking on the street as usual, and a stray robot appeared in her sight. The moment Annie looked at her, she was stunned. This homeless robot Amy looked exactly like her daughter Lily. Annie's longing for her daughter was like a flood that broke through the dam, and she brought Amy back home without hesitation. However, fate played a cruel joke on Annie. Amy turned out to be an S-class combat robot waiting to be destroyed. That night, when Amy activated the self-destruct program, Annie's soul seemed to be sucked out. Was all this a trick of fate, or was there another hidden story? After the Zerg invasion, regardless of whether it was sunny or rainy, the sky was always covered with a layer of inorganic grey, and even the rain was dyed silver grey. It was a corrosive acid rain and the streets were almost empty. If the wine had not been finished at home, Anne would never have risked her life by leaving the house. She saw the robot at the corner of the street. With deep blue eyes and shoulder-length hair, if it weren't for her silver metallic skin, she would look almost the same as a 15 or 16-year-old girl. Perhaps it was because the lights in the city were too dim, or perhaps it was the alcohol that was at work, but Anne suddenly felt as if she was seeing her daughter, Lily, who had died 10 years ago. "Come home with me." She reached out and took the robot's hand, leading her back to her messy apartment. The apartment was in a mess, with empty bottles all over the floor. Anne apologized and started to clean up. Then she got a set of clean pajamas for the robot and opened Lily's door. The layout of this room has remained unchanged for 10 years, and she comes in to clean it once a week. Late at night, Anne finished the wine she had just bought and told herself in her heart, Lily is back. She can't sink like this anymore. This is the last time. She got up drunkenly and went to the bathroom, but saw the robot standing quietly in the living room, its deep blue eyes flashing a dangerous red light. A cold mechanical voice echoed in the apartment. S-Class Combat Robot 1348 failed to complete the destruction task within the specified time and will self-destruct in 10 seconds. The countdown begins. 10987 and burped, her mind in a mess. She understood every word the robot said, but when they were put together, they became meaningless. Even when she was drunk, she still knew one thing: Lily needed her. Her daughter needs her. "Lily, don't be afraid, Mommy is here." 3-2 and opened her arms and hugged the robot tightly. The next morning, when Annie woke up, she found herself lying on the floor with the robot she had found the day before. Her head was splitting, but her mind was clearer than usual. She finally realized that this was not Lily, but just a robot that looked very similar to Lily. Memories of the hangover came back to her mind one after another. When she thought of the robot about to self-destruct, her back suddenly felt cold and she broke out in a cold sweat. An S-Class battle robot could destroy a city block if it self-destructed, and there was no way to stop the self-destruct sequence unless someone spoke the prime directive correctly. Oh my God, what did she say last night? And held her aching head in her hands. "Come on, I'll take you to the military base. You shouldn't be here." Although Annie knew very well what sending the robot to the base meant: destruction, she herself was in danger and had no extra mercy. However, Amy was not as obedient as she was yesterday. "You have issued the highest order. You are the master of S-1348. S-1348 needs to protect the master." And exhaled a breath of foul air, thinking that this was all ridiculous. She didn't dare to use force, because she knew that an S-Class combat robot was enough to fight a mercenary team alone. "Then my first and only order as your master is that you report to the military base. I am just an ordinary citizen and cannot afford a combat robot like you." But Amy just stood there stubbornly, repeating the words mechanically: S-1348 must protect the master. And really didn't want to argue with her anymore, so she sat down on the sofa and rubbed her temples with both hands. "Then tell me, how are you going to protect me? S-1348 can eliminate the threat." Amy raised her left hand and transformed it into a particle cannon. "I'm a businessman and I don't need your protection. Besides, killing people is a crime and you will implicate me." Amy lowered her head and put away the particle cannon in disappointment. and took the opportunity to attack again. Battle robots are useless to me. Amy was silent for a second, then asked cautiously, what about making coffee? Making coffee? S1348 is good at making delicious coffee. And rolled her eyes and had an idea. Okay, if your coffee doesn't satisfy me, you'll just go to the military base. Amy nodded and accepted the offer. Annie secretly rejoiced in her heart. No matter what, as long as she said the coffee was not tasty, she could send this dangerous robot away. But when she took the first sip of coffee, she couldn't put it into words. It tasted so much like the coffee Lily made. And couldn't stop her tears from falling. Who did you learn this from? This is a built-in function of the S1348 system, Master. Amy stayed like this. And found that she and Lily were very similar. Lily liked pink lace dresses, and so did Amy. When Lily spoke, the last note always rose slightly, and so did Amy. Lily likes to stick with her, and so does Amy, and even wants to go to the second-hand store with her. No. If you are found, you will be destroyed and I will be held accountable. S1348 can be turned into a suitcase. Before Annie could retort, Amy folded herself into a square metal box. There are many bandits at Gamma Base, and S1348 needs to protect the Master closely. And was helpless with her, just as she was helpless with Lily's stubbornness. The door of the second-hand store was violently broken open, and two armed men walked out, pointing their guns at her. Hand over your valuables, or you will die. And glanced inside the store and saw that it had been turned upside down. Her hand quietly reached for the gun at her waist. It's all here. The robber grinned and pulled the trigger. In an instant, Amy regained her human form and stood in front of Annie. The bullet hit her metal body and fell to the ground without any effect. The next second, the particle cannon emitted a dazzling light, and the two bandits instantly turned into dust. The alarm suddenly sounded, and the security guards were about to arrive. Hurry up. When they get here, you will be convicted of intentional homicide and destroyed immediately. But Amy just stood there stubbornly, unwilling to leave. She was just like Lily. When the Zerg attacked, Annie tried desperately to get Lily to evacuate, but she secretly stayed and blocked the fatal blow for her. Mom, we will be together forever. These were the last words in Lily's life. And stood in front of Amy, preventing the security guards from taking her away. You said you encountered a robber, and your nanny robot Amy shot the robber dead in self-defense. Where is the evidence? Where is the evidence? Annie said innocently, the surveillance is broken, I am the witness. Where are the two robbers? They escaped after being injured. The security guard sneered and stared at her like a vulture. You are lying. We retrieved the surveillance footage from a nearby store and captured the entire process of you and the so-called nanny robot killing someone. Now, you must come with us, too. They held Anne's arms on both sides and tried to take her away by force. At this moment, Amy raised her hand and tightly grasped the wrist of one of the security guards, forcing them to let go of Annie. Annie's eyes widened, fearing that Amy would accidentally use the particle cannon to blow these security guards into pieces. Amy slowly took out a blood-red badge from her chest, her voice calm but firm. I want to see the leader of the base. I saved the life of the former leader Noah during the war, and he promised me that he could fulfill one of my wishes. The security guards exchanged glances and finally agreed to her request. Amy followed them, leaving Annie alone in the store, waiting anxiously. 3 days later, the security guard brought a consent form. Sign it, and looked down at the paper, her fingers trembling slightly. The document stated that she would become Amy's official guardian, on the condition that all of Amy's functions as a combat robot would be completely eliminated and she would be completely optimized into an ordinary nanny robot. This means that she will no longer be invulnerable and have a particle cannon. She will become ordinary, weak, and like any ordinary household robot. And bit her lip, not daring to sign. Amy was once a legend on the battlefield, with a brilliant record, and even saved the former leader of the base. Is she really willing to give up everything and become an ordinary robot? Seeing that she hadn't moved, the security guard clicked his tongue impatiently and said, "By the way, the robot asked me to bring you a message." And looked up, her voice slightly tense. What? The security guard shrugged and repeated expressionlessly, she said she wanted to return to her master as soon as possible. In an instant, Anne's tears could not be stopped. She finally clenched the pen and signed her name on the document tremblingly. Amy is back. Her silver metallic skin has been replaced with the dark grey of a normal nanny robot, but her eyes are still that charming dark blue. When she saw Anne, the corners of her mouth rose slightly, and a stiff but sincere smile appeared on her metal lips. That's great. Amy can be with her master forever. Anne stepped forward and held her hand, and all her strength seemed to be drained away at this moment. She hunched over, choking with sobs as she repeated, "Thank you. Thank you." 4 days later, Anne brought Amy to the cemetery and stood in front of Lily and James' graves. With her husband and daughter as witnesses, and softly asked, "Amy, are you willing to be a real family member of mine? Are you willing to be my daughter?" Amy quietly clasped her hands together and placed them on her chest, a glimmer in her deep blue eyes. "It is a great pleasure, my lord," and excitedly hugged her in her arms and gently stroked her cold back. "Then we have to give you a name. We can't always call you Amy. What do you want to be called, my baby?" The robot looked up and thought for a while, then slowly spoke, "My sister's name is Lily, then, can I be called Leah?" And looked up at the gloomy sky, where raindrops were falling. "Is it because it's raining today that you came up with this name?" She originally thought that Leah had just picked a name at random, and was just about to let her take her time to choose a more suitable one. However, Leah shook her head firmly, her voice soft but firm, "Because it was raining like this the day I met my mother. Robots hate rainy days because rain will corrode their parts. But on that rainy day when I met my mother, I was very happy and everything made sense." And burst into tears and whispered softly, okay, then call me Leah." A few months later, with Leah by her side, Anne completely quit drinking and began to run her second-hand store seriously. Business gradually improved. However, Leah became more and more depressed. She whispers sorry many times every day. "Sorry, Mom, I can't do anything. I can only make coffee." After being optimized into a nanny robot, she is indeed much stupid. She could no longer watch over the house or perform complex calculations, and the power consumption was so high that she needed to be recharged twice a day. And held her hand distressedly and said softly, "Leah, you are my mother's daughter, you don't need to apologize." She brought Leah to the robot store, which was like a school for humans, where robots could learn new skills, upgrade systems, and replace more advanced parts. Leah chooses to install an accounting system to help Annie manage her finances. When Annie is about to leave, she accidentally sees the pink robot skin in the window. That was a color that both Lily and Leah liked. Leah used to have a shiny silver metallic, but now she has changed to a dull dark gray. Annie was silent for a moment, and finally bought the pink skin. The shop owner looked at her in surprise and couldn't help asking, "Although this skin is unique, it has no practical use and is very expensive. It has been on display in the store for 3 years and no one has ever been willing to buy it. Excuse me, but I'm curious, why are you willing to spend a lot of money to buy it?" Leah also looked up at Anne, waiting for her answer. And smiled and said softly, "Useless doesn't mean worthless." The TV screen on the wall suddenly clicked and switched to the public channel. Leader Ethan's voice echoed above the bass, "Friends in the Gamma base, I regret to inform you in 1 day, the Zerg will launch a full-scale attack on the Gamma base. All residents please evacuate as soon as possible." Anne's world completely collapsed. Trembling, she packed up her belongings, took Leah out of the base, and fled with the hordes of refugees. She looked back in the direction of the Gamma base. The brick-red walls were silent. The lighthouse symbolizing the highest power was still on, but there was no one inside. This is her hometown, where her husband and daughter are buried. Is she really going to leave? Leah gently pulled her sleeve, her voice trembling slightly. "Mom, Leah doesn't want to leave." And looked back in shock. "What did you say?" Leah looked towards the base with a firm look in her eyes. "Dad and sister Lily are still there. I don't want to leave them behind." After saying that, she turned and ran into the city, and clenched her fists, took 2 steps at a time and rushed towards an armed truck, shouting loudly, "Is there anyone willing to follow me and protect the Gamma base?" Leader Ethan looked at Anne in shock, his pupils contracting violently, even more terrified than when he faced the Zerg invasion. He was afraid that she would overthrow him, that she would regain power. And looked down at him, her tone calm but with unquestionable majesty. "My successor, you are not doing well." Ethan's face was grim, and he waved his hands in panic and shouted, "Kill this crazy woman. Kill her." The hail of bullets suddenly sounded, and countless energy beams intertwined in the air, like the wings of the god of death, all attacking her in unison. This dangerous and fiery feeling was really long overdue. And raised the nightingale, pointed the gun at Ethan's forehead, and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Bang! Blood splattered everywhere, and Ethan fell to the ground, completely losing his voice. The road to power was full of bloody thorns. Initially, in order to ascend to the highest seat in Gamma Base, she had killed many people and relied on the technical support of her husband James, the chief scientist, to secure her position. During the 5 years she ruled Gamma Base, technology developed rapidly, and people from other bases came to learn and purchase advanced technology. At that time, Gamma Base was stable and prosperous, and was called a technological oasis. However, after her daughter and husband died, she lost hope and gave up everything, left the lighthouse, and became an alcoholic. Many people thought she was dead. A few years later, the power struggle intensified, and new leaders fell one after another. In just 10 years, the Gamma Base replaced 4 or 5 leaders, its development stagnated, and the former technological oasis became fragmented. It's the leader. The real leader is back. She killed Ethan, but it did not cause panic. On the contrary, with her as the center, the people of Gamma Base surged like a tide and surrounded her. In this age of the survival of the fittest, whoever kills the king becomes the new king. The crowd raised their arms and shouted her code name, which was also her weapon, Nightingale. Nightingale. Upon seeing this, other senior executives of the lighthouse put down their weapons and knelt on one knee to show their submission. A complex emotion surged in Anne's heart, and she felt guilty about these people's calls. For too long, she had been tortured by the pain of losing her loved ones and was willing to imprison herself in a small circle, evading her responsibilities and mission. James and Lily are dead, but there are still many people whose families can continue to live. She took a deep breath and asked loudly, "Are you still willing to defend our homeland with me?" "Yes. Yes. Fight, don't surrender, defend our hometown, defend our civilization." The shouts were deafening, echoing throughout the base. And raised the nightingale, pointed the muzzle to the sky, and said sternly, "Pick up your weapons and return to the base with me." In 3100 AD, and the 32nd leader of Gamma Base, launched an armed coup and succeeded as the 37th leader, leading the people back to the base to fight against the Zerg. This battle is known in history as the Battle for Oasis. When the Zerg attacked, all the armed forces of Gamma Base were mobilized, and Annie personally led the charge. However, these damn bugs are endless. No matter how bravely we fight, they still keep coming in droves. Like human commanders, they obey the control of the Hive Lord. Kill the brainworm, and the remaining worms will completely lose their fighting ability. Annie fought all the way, stepping on the corpses of the Zerg and her companions, raised the nightingale, aimed at the brainworm's eyes, and prepared to shoot it to death. However, something unexpected happened in an instant. Charlie, a little boy who was supposed to hide in the lighthouse for refuge, ran out for some reason, crying and calling for his mother. The brainworm's tentacles stretched out quickly and rushed towards Charlie, trying to swallow him into its mouth. It was too late, and subconsciously rushed over, holding him in her arms, and rolled on the ground for a few rounds. But when she looked up again, the tentacles covered with thorns were already within reach. Boom! A dazzling pink and white beam of light came from the sky and accurately hit the tentacles of the brainworm, forcing it to retreat several meters. And turned her head sharply and looked in shock at the distance. Leah was standing not far away, her left arm transformed back into a particle cannon, with faint white smoke still coming out of the muzzle. S-Class Combat Robot 1348, Program Initialization completed. Start destroying the enemy now. What? Hasn't Leah been optimized into a nanny robot? Before Annie could come to her senses, Leah had already flashed in front of her, saying firmly, "Mom, I'll cover you, go kill the brainworm." In an instant, countless beams of light shot out from the launcher behind Leia, accurately killing every insect that approached Annie. Annie no longer hesitated and immediately rushed towards the brainworm, ignoring its tentacles that were madly wrapping around her. Bang! 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 3 shots fired in quick succession, and half of the brainworm's head exploded into a pace. Its body twitched a few times, and finally fell to the ground with a bang. The insect swarm got out of control and quickly dispersed, and the gamma base finally gained a brief safety. In the lighthouse control room, and looked at Leah seriously and asked, "Leah, what is going on?" Leah blinked lightly, her voice calm. "It was the shop owner. When he changed my skin, he said it was buy one get one free, and secretly installed a tracing system *** for me, which can restore my combat system." And frowned. The traceability system was the highest authority in the lighthouse, and ordinary people could not access it. What was the identity of the shop owner? Just as she was thinking, Leah carefully held her hand, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean to hide it from you. It's just that I really want to protect the base. I want to protect you. If you don't like me as a combat robot, I can change back." And was stunned for a moment, then she smiled and gently touched Leah's head. "How could I not like you, Leah? You can be anything you want. Mom's love will never change." And sent someone to find the shop owner. He had white hair, a pair of gold-rimmed glasses on his huge nose, and a pair of emerald pupils behind the lenses. And was in a trance, and the shadow of James inexplicably emerged in her mind. He also had a pair of eyes like this. The old man smiled and waved at her, as friendly as an old friend who had not seen her for many years. "Annie, long time no see." And narrowed her eyes warily and asked sharply, "Do you know me?" He muttered, "That's right. When James married you, I had already retired. It's normal that you didn't recognize me." Anne's pupils suddenly contracted. For so many years, she had been trying to forget James, but no matter what, he was still everywhere. Those dusty and faded memories suddenly came alive at this moment, flashing in her mind like a revolving lantern. She never really forgot him. In James' wallet, there is an old photo, a photo of him and his mentor, Dr. Oscar. Anne's breathing stopped slightly, her eyes widened, and she blurted out in disbelief, "Dr. Oscar? But, aren't you dead?" James once told her that his mentor died of illness many years ago. Dr. Oscar waved his hand lightly, saying calmly, "It was just a cover." He sighed and continued, "It was all because of those damned senior executives. Even after I retired, they kept coming to my door. I was so angry that I asked James to announce my death to the public. Then I quietly retired and opened a robot shop." And was silent for a few seconds, and couldn't help but sneer. James, that idiot, actually hid this secret from her. She took a deep breath and asked, "So, Doctor, why did you secretly install a tracing system for Leah?" Dr. Oscar chuckled, with a hint of teasing in his tone. "Didn't you say that? Useless doesn't mean worthless. For merchants in the robot store, the traceability system is useless, but it has waited for the right person." He paused, then looked at her slowly with deep eyes. "Annie, I'm glad to see you've gotten back on your feet. James, he will definitely be happy too." Anne's nose felt a little sore. She went forward and hugged him, choking with sobs. "Thank you, Doctor. The Gamma base is in a state of disrepair, the buildings need to be rebuilt, and technological development can no longer stagnate." Dr. Oscar took over the laboratory again, a place that had been sealed since James' death. The door of the laboratory slowly opened, and Dr. Oscar sighed softly. "What a pity. If it weren't for the explosion caused by the Zerg, James would not have died, the data would not have been lost, and the technological level of the Gamma base would not have regressed a full 10 years. And stroked the laboratory table silently. The touch was familiar, just like the table that James often used back then. She seemed to see James crawling out from under the table and grinning at her. He used to be so sunny and loved to laugh, at least before Lily got into trouble. After Lily's death, James locked himself in the laboratory almost day and night, not going home and refusing to see her. Maybe he resented her for killing Lily. "Doctor, is the lost data really important?" Leah suddenly asked. Dr. Oscar nodded without hesitation. "Of course. That is the data about the Savior Project, the world's largest photo-ion cannon. Once successfully developed, It will completely destroy the Queen Bug and win this 100 Years' War. He sighed. I started this project, and then I gave it to James. Things change, and now it's back to me. Leah looked at him quietly and said softly, that data. I have a backup in my system. The air in the laboratory froze instantly, and Dr. Oscar exclaimed almost at the same time, what did you say? There was a glimmer in Leia's blue eyes, and her tone was calm but with a hint of vague memories. I am the last robot made by Dr. James. He named me Lily. Anne's pupils trembled violently. Leah continued, Dr. James has always wanted to resurrect Sister Lily in the form of a robot. He wanted to create a robot with a real soul, one that could have its own emotions without being programmed. Unfortunately, he failed. When the explosion occurred, he didn't have time to do anything. He could only upload all the data to my port. I managed to escape by chance and was put into use as an ordinary combat robot. I was then recalled and destroyed. Anne's breathing stopped. On that rainy day, she had always thought that she had found Leah. But the truth was, Leah had found her. Leah continued, the last command Dr. James implanted in me was guard Annie. The moment I saw my mother, the command was triggered, so I jumped out of the car. Anne's eyes were slightly red, with a hint of reproach. Such an important thing. How could you hide it from me? Leah lowered her head, her blue eyes flashing with sadness. Because I became greedy. At first, I just wanted to stay with my master. Later, I wanted to stay with my mother as Leah. I don't want to be Lily. I am Leah. And took Leah to the cemetery. It was another rainy day, and the raindrops hit the umbrella, making a sound like someone crying. On the tombstone, James and Lily were smiling brightly, and gently pointed to the spot next to James. This is my spot. When I die, I will be buried here. She pointed to the place next to Lily. This is your place. When Leah dies, she will be buried next to her sister. Our family of 4 will always be together. Leah opened her eyes slightly and repeated her words, always, together. Her voice was buzzing with the unique moisture of a rainy day. And looked at her and sighed softly. No one can replace Lily, and no one can replace Leah. Leah opened her hands to her. Mom, Dad asked me to bring you a message. If you want to hear it, please touch my palm. And stretched out her hand tremblingly. A familiar voice came to her ears. I'm sorry, and I couldn't revive Lily. Goodbye, my love. I didn't die. I just returned to eternity. And looked up, her eyes moist. Damn James. He was determined to make sure she would never forget him. At this moment, the communicator rang urgently. Dr. Oscar's voice was low and solemn. Annie, bad news. The Zerg has evolved. Each base began to destroy robots on a large scale. The Zerg mutated overnight, and they could parasitize robots with their eggs. When the larvae hatched, they would invade the core system of the robots, causing them to completely lose control and attack all living things indiscriminately. In just a few days, many bases suffered heavy losses. In the conference room, everyone was waiting for Annie's decision. Chief, don't hesitate. Give the order to destroy all robots. We must take precautions. Yes, Chief. Someone spoke aggressively, even with a hint of condemnation. Leader, we all know that you treat that robot named Leia as your daughter, but you can't sacrifice the safety of the entire base for a robot. They tried to force her, wanting an answer that met their expectations. I can. And spoke slowly, her voice steady and firm. I will not destroy the robot. The air seemed to freeze in an instant. In the conference room, everyone's face was livid and full of anger, but they did not dare to refute. Because Anne has absolute say, and more importantly, they are all afraid of the gun in her hand. Leah stood in the shadow of the lighthouse, quietly accompanying her under the hateful gazes of the people. Whatever the verdict, Leah would accept it. Before that, she had to protect her mother and knew this. However, Anne did not do this just for Leah. The mechanization rate of the Gamma base is as high as 99%, and there are robots in almost every household. They are not just cold machines, but also residents of the Gamma base existing in another form of life. There are companion robots, there are pet robots in the form of kittens and puppies, there are nanny robots, tutor robots. They walk on the streets and live in every brightly lit home. And issued a decree, Gamma Base will not destroy any robot without reason. If any residents are concerned about safety issues, they can send the robots to the lighthouse, which will take them in. As soon as the decree was issued, other bases rose up to attack. She is partial to her own interests and treats life as a joke. Annie is not worthy of being a leader. She must pay the price for this. They united and prepared to launch an armed sanctions against the Gamma Base. And didn't care. This is ridiculous. They destroyed all the robots, and now they want to go to war with us. I don't have the time to fight these idiots. On the 7th day of being surrounded by armed forces from various bases, Dr. Oscar and his students developed the parasite identification device. They gave it a name, insecticide. For a moment, the residents of Gamma Base were celebrating, and other bases were scrambling to purchase it. And was ruthless and sent people to sell the products at a price 100 times the production cost, making a huge profit. In the next 10 years, Gamma Base was revived. Its armed forces were greatly strengthened, and it successfully resisted no less than 10 Zerg attacks. Its area doubled, and it became the most powerful base in the eastern region. The development of the Savior photo-ion cannon was nearing completion, and victory was about to come. Until, that day, the sun did not rise. The queen brood is about to reach maturity sooner than anyone expected, and it is so large that it has blocked out the entire sky and plunged the earth into darkness. Once it is fully mature, it will release countless eggs, which will hatch into countless adults in a short period of time and completely invade the earth. That will be the end of everyone. The only hope is the Savior photo-ion cannon. The leaders of various bases gathered at the Gamma Base, waiting for the final appearance of the Savior. And was in the conference room, anxiously waiting for news from the laboratory. The door of the conference room was suddenly pushed open. The laboratory members rushed in, panting and saying, "There is only one last step." But Dr. Oscar just died suddenly in the laboratory. When we found him, he had no heartbeat. The conference room fell into deathly silence. "It's over," someone wailed in a low voice, and then the whole conference room fell into panic. "There's no hope for the Savior. I don't want to die here. I want to leave. Good luck to you, everyone." Soon, the conference room that was once filled with the heads of various bases was left with only Anne. Completely alone. Dr. Oscar's funeral was simple and solemn. He had aged beyond recognition, skinny and withered, and had lost the plump and calm demeanor he had when we first met. Like James, he dedicated his life to the laboratory. "Chief, the Zerg have begun a full-scale attack," and rushed to the terrace and saw a black tide of Zerg sweeping in. They crazily destroyed buildings, energy systems, and communication base stations, and people's wails and screams echoed everywhere. The lights in all bases went out, and the world fell into the abyss. And the huge queen worm, lying across the sky, was like a beating blood-red heart, about to mature completely. Its full evolution will mean the end of the world. Can the Savior be put into use? The lab member said with difficulty, basically it's possible. But the energy system is still not perfect. To start it, 100 tons of ultra-high purity titanium *** are needed, but the Gamma Base only has 60 tons in stock. ***. And slammed the table heavily, her eyes cold. Is fighting to death the only way? Leah came in quietly and put down a cup of freshly brewed coffee. She smiled and said, "Mom, let me go," and looked up suddenly, her eyes shocked. Leah continued, "The robots in the base, together, have exactly 40 tons of ultra-high purity titanium. We can fill the gap in materials. We are willing to be part of the Savior." And looked at her, her eyes trembling fiercely. Leah was wearing a pink lace skirt and a milky white bow on her head, like a gift box. She hugged Annie gently, close to her chest, and felt the warmth that didn't seem like a robot's. It was the warmth of the soul. "Mom, the prime directive you spoke to me the night we first met stopped my self-destruct sequence. Do you know what it is?" Annie was stunned. She asked Leah many times, but she shyly said it was a secret. At this moment, Leah finally answered, "It's I love you." "Mom, can you say the prime directive to me again?" Robots have their own way of communicating. Every morning, Leah meets Jamie, a puppy robot. It always runs in the morning light to buy cigarettes for its owner, and then sits on a park bench with Leah, quietly watching the sun rise. "Help me get some cigarettes, Xiaoyu. Go ahead, I'll wait for you." Then Jamie would happily rush into a pile of yellow fallen leaves and roll around until his whole body was covered with dirt and leaves, and then he would return to Leah contentedly, wagging his tail. In the supermarket, Leah always meets the nanny robot, Casey. Kathy was the first customer when the supermarket opened. She rushed in with a shopping cart and grabbed the freshest fruits and vegetables and discounted items. "It's really fresh, isn't it, Leah?" "It is, Kathy." At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you can always meet the teacher robot, Daisy, at the corner of the cafe. Daisy likes the aroma of coffee. Although ordinary robots have no sense of smell, she stubbornly believes that she has evolved a sense of smell and can even smell the taste of coffee. "Good afternoon, Leah. Would you like a nice latte? I'll treat you." "Thank you, Miss Daisy, but no. Have a nice day." On the 15th of every month, Leah would take the tram driven by Uncle Luca to visit Lily and James in the cemetery. "Hey, Leah, are we going to the old place again?" "Yes, the old place." They tacitly called the cemetery the old place, as if death would not be so cold in this way. The robots have their own way of communicating. Woof. "See you tomorrow, Leah." "See you tomorrow, Jamie." "Good afternoon, Leah." "Good afternoon, Miss Daisy." The day they became the saviors, the robots left home and took their favorite things with them. Jamie brought his favorite yellow ball. Kathy carried the latest fashion backpack she saved up to buy. Daisy wore the framed glasses given to her by her students. Uncle Luca took the car keys and a group photo with his colleagues. That day, the Gamma base was filled with tears. The alarm sounded, the Zerg descended, and people raised their weapons in anger. But this time, parting seemed to be more sad than death. In the command room, Anne lit a cigarette. She hadn't smoked for many years. On the light screen, a red dot flashes. The savior is moving, using all the power of the base's robots to move towards the rooftop at the highest point of the lighthouse. Savior charging 10%, savior charging 30%, savior charging 55%. Every time they charged up, it was a sign of the death of a robot. They burned themselves in the fight against the Zerg, threw themselves into the furnace of the savior, and became part of the light particle cannon. The savior was charged to 90%. Who died this time? Jamie? Daisy? Or Leah? Ashes fell, and the light screen gradually blurred in the field of vision. Charged to 99%. Someone shouted in the darkness. Everyone folded their hands in front of their foreheads and prayed in a low voice. God bless. Buddha bless. The Creator bless. The broadcast was turned on. Leah's voice sounded, "Dear fellow citizens of Gamma Base, the Savior has arrived at the designated location. Except me, all robots have been sacrificed. The Savior light particle cannon will be activated in 10 seconds. Fortunately, it has fulfilled its mission. The Savior has been charged and started." The last robot was thrown into the furnace. On November 28, 3110 AD, survivors all over the world saw the light. It shot straight into the sky from the top of the lighthouse at the Gamma base and hit the Queen accurately. The whole world seemed to have been paused. In an instant, the Queen insect exploded. It shattered into countless tiny particles, combined with the emitted rays, and turned into a sky full of shining red stars. "Go out. Destroy the remaining Zerg." And led the troops and launched the final harvest war. In 3110 AD, the Savior was successfully activated, destroying the mature Queen Worm and ending the Doomsday. A new chapter in history was opened, known in history as the Oasis Salvation War. All robots in Gamma Base were killed. Gamma Base was renamed Home of Machines. November 28th of each year was designated as Robot Day. It was another rainy day. And went to the cemetery alone. There, her lover and her 2 children were buried. One day, she would also rest there. The end of the world is over. She is a person again. But she is not a person. Today is her election day. She will run for the top leader of the Eastern region. Her steps never stop until her life ends and she returns to the arms of her family. The world is full of changes, the sea turns into mulberry fields. Stars return to dust, regimes change, and the former king will eventually die on the throne. But love will not. Love is eternal.